Now, we're diving into a critical topic that's shaping global geopolitics: the evolving US policy toward the war in Ukraine. As Indians, we're closely watching how major powers navigate conflicts like this, given our own strategic interests. The US approach has shifted dramatically since Russia's invasion in February 2022, and there's a growing conversation about what a Ukrainian victory could mean. But it's not straightforward. There are debates, dilemmas, and divisions, especially within the Republican Party and with Donald Trump's changing stance. Let's break it all down. The US started out focused on helping Ukraine defend itself and deter Russian aggression. We've seen massive military, financial, and humanitarian aid flow to Kiev, all while avoiding direct conflict with Russia. That's why the US has been cautious about certain weapons and rejected ideas like a no-fly zone. At the same time, they've led global efforts to sanction and isolate Russia. But now, the idea of Ukraine achieving a full-on victory, think restoring its 1991 borders, including Crimea, is gaining traction in Washington. Several factors are pushing this shift. Ukrainian battlefield gains are building momentum for more decisive aid. Russia's heavy losses make some argue that backing Ukraine to win now is cheaper than letting Russia regroup and become a bigger threat later. Morally and geopolitically, letting Russia succeed could weaken the international rules-based order, while a strong Ukrainian victory with Western support would boost NATO's credibility. But here's where it gets tricky. Committing fully to Ukraine's victory comes with big risks. The biggest worry is escalation. Pushing Russia out of occupied territories might make Moscow feel cornered, potentially leading to extreme moves like tactical nuclear weapons or even direct clashes with NATO. There's also talk of forever war fatigue, the massive cost of an open-ended commitment, and the uncertainty of a quick win, especially if Russia digs in for a long fight. Some argue for a negotiated settlement, even if it means Ukraine gets less favorable terms, to avoid escalation. Whether the US goes all in on victory depends on a lot: the 2025 presidential election cycle, Ukraine's battlefield progress, Russia's actions, European unity, and America's domestic economic and political climate. Now, let's talk about the Republican Party, where things get really complicated. Early on, support for Ukraine was bipartisan, but an isolationist wing, often tied to Donald Trump, started questioning the scale of US involvement. They've tied aid to domestic issues like border security, and early 2025 polls showed some Republican voters losing sympathy for Ukraine. A turning point came in April 2025 when the Republican-led House under Speaker Mike Johnson passed a big aid package despite pushback from hardliners. Johnson framed it as a national security priority, highlighting the Russian threat. To win votes, they pitched the aid as a business arrangement, even floating a US-Ukraine investment fund tied to Ukraine's mineral resources, making it sound like a deal that benefits America economically. It helped that pro-Ukraine Republicans who backed the bill won their primaries in March 2025, giving them political cover. Still, Republican support comes with strings attached. They want accountability for the aid, a clear victory plan, and Ukraine to shoulder more of the financial load. For many, it's about weakening Russia as a US strategic interest. But there's frustration with Ukrainian President Zelensky, and most Republicans oppose Ukraine joining NATO, showing they're cautious about deeper commitments. Then there's Donald Trump, whose stance is evolving in fascinating ways. He's always pushed for a quick end to the conflict with a transactional mindset, but things are shifting. In late May 2025, Trump came out swinging against Vladimir Putin, calling him playing with fire and absolutely crazy during intense Russian attacks. He warned that if Putin tries to take all of Ukraine, it'll lead to Russia's downfall. Reports say Trump is seriously considering lifting restrictions on how Ukraine can use US-supplied weapons against Russia, believing the current limits don't help bring Russia to the negotiating table. His frustration with stalled peace talks, even after a recent call with Putin, seems to be driving this. He's even hinted at ramping up sanctions on Moscow, which he was hesitant to do before. While he still talks about the US possibly stepping back and letting Europe handle things if talks fail, he's now emphasizing that negotiations need to deliver results. His transactional side hasn't gone away. He's eyeing Ukraine's mineral resources as a potential US economic win. but his criticism of Zelensky remains a constant thread. So, where does this leave us? The US is leaning toward boosting Ukraine's ability to win, but a full-on victory at all costs approach, ignoring diplomatic options, is still up for debate. The Republican Party is back to supporting aid, but with conditions and internal splits. Trump's tougher talk on Putin and openness to empowering Ukraine mark a big shift, though his moves are still unpredictable. The debates in Washington show deep strategic dilemmas, and any major policy changes will likely be slow, hinging on what happens on the ground and in US politics. For us as Indians, this matters. It's a reminder of how global powers balance security, alliances, and domestic pressures, something we navigate in our own region.